All right, everybody. I want to confront maybe a difficult issue. Well, yes and no. An issue that I see in the mental health world, and one that just frankly doesn't get a lot of attention, and I just think that it needs to. So the title of this video is basically, why is it so hard to find a good therapist? And I hear this all the time. I hear from people that they've had a lot of negative experiences with therapists. Unfortunately, too, when it comes to being a therapist or like a doctor, if someone has a bad experience with one, then they lump them in together. I mean, if you had a bad experience with a grocery store clerk, it doesn't mean all the grocery store clerks are bad, but but I get it. Therapy is a very, very personal thing. If you go to therapy, it may be one of the most personal and vulnerable things that you do. So, which is why, as a therapist, I always try to do my best to express to people that I'm proud of them for coming, showing up, and having the courage to sit on my couch. It takes courage. It takes some serious chutzpah to go and sit in front of a therapist and be vulnerable and be uncertain about how the process goes. So it's unfortunate to me when people have a negative experience, and kind of understandable at the same time why they're not terribly interested in going back if they have had a bad experience. But all that being said, there's a lot of things about the world of being a clinician or being a therapist that most people don't know or understand. And truth be told, over the years, it has become harder and harder and harder to be a good clinician. And good clinicians are disappearing. They just are. Less and less people want to be a therapist because it's difficult and frankly it doesn't pay very well. So I'm going to basically run down a list of the reasons why people don't want to be a therapist anymore. And I hate to admit it, but what can I say? I don't know how to say anything but honest. Um, I have wanted to quit many times. I have wanted to give up on it many times because it just, as at one point, it was very, very taxing and very, very, it just didn't seem worth it. And so I want to give people kind of a peek into why it's so difficult to find a good therapist. Okay? First of all, I want to put it out there that there's, generally speaking, for the most part, a national shortage of clinicians. There's basically kind of an industry standard that we hope to have X amount of number of therapists or clinicians per 100,000 people. And I know my local area is vastly underserved. So my local area is well below the national average for number of the need for healthcare or mental health care workers, and the existence of that number and the people that need to be served. Now, my local state made the mistake years ago to ramp up the qualifications and the necessary government hoop jumping that had to be done in order to be a practicing clinician. My state has had some of some of the toughest standards in terms of just getting there, let alone if you're transferring from another state. And when I was in graduate school, there was a guy in my cohort that had been a practicing therapist in the state of Florida, and he came here and his degree wasn't even recognized as an actual degree. He had to go back to school and get a whole other master's degree to practice therapy again. And so the moving state to state within the country has made it difficult. But the amount of expectations on us, it's hard enough, right, to understand the nuances of behavior, psychology, dividing trauma from personality, or trying to figure out if you're looking at a substance abuse problem, or if you're looking at a personality problem, if you're looking at borderline, if you're looking at bipolar. It's very, very difficult to be really skilled in this area, but you also have to be proficient at paperwork, insurance billing. You have to get your continuing education units, and it burns us out. We are frankly burning out, and I swear every time I turn around, I hear someone else say therapists should be required to do this now, and there are those in the community who are sick of it and are standing up and saying no more requirements. We're done. Every time we turn around, you want to throw on another requirement for us to follow through with. And frankly, it just gets old. Legislators decide that therapists need to do more things. And too many of us are like, you know what, forget it, peace out, because the truth is, it doesn't pay that well. Insurance reimbursement rates have not changed in a very long time. My local area, for example, the cost of living continues to raise and spike. And the amount of pay that therapists are making in a clinic stays really low. And there's no, as a clinical director and being on the front lines of this, I get it, where it's just like, how are we supposed to keep our doors open and cover all of the overhead and all the expenses while paying a therapist a higher amount of pay? It's not feasible. It just can't be done. The other thing that is destroying, frankly, completely decimating the therapist's desire to be a therapist is Medicaid. Medicaid funding is a nightmare to deal with. They will give you a list of requirements to follow through in order to get paid, exact specifications. If you don't follow through with a lot of these tiny little stipulations, they can not only penalize you by taking money back, and I've heard of Medicaid going into a place, walking out with 15, 20 grand and taking their money back for small infractions like timestamps not matching up, or the treatment plan update is a few days late, things like that. Take back, oh, well, your treatment plan update is 4 days late. Well, we're going to take back the last 90 days of payments then. And you're broke. You are broke. In worst case scenarios, they will criminally prosecute you, accusing you of fraud. And so me at my clinic, where I'm the clinical director again, hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm bragging, I tell the clinicians when they come on, I'm like, we don't do Medicaid. And they're like, oh, good. Woo! Can I please work here? Medicaid is just, I'll show you a therapist that loves their job and put them doing Medicaid funding for 2 years, and 2 years later they want out. They want to do something else. Medicaid is a morale buster. So it's hard enough for us to navigate the complications of being a qualified and skilled clinician, have a personal life, have personal problems, and then deal with all these other nuances. And then when we get our paycheck, we go, wow, that's it? And so while it's tough that I know there's so many people out there that are suffering. There are so many people out there that really need help. That a good therapist is not only hard to find, but can really make a positive difference. Truth be told, folks, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, you need to be willing to pay that therapist. If they're really helping and they're worth it to you, you got to be willing to pay them. You got to be willing to make it worth their while. You got to help them feel like, hey, maybe I can make this work. And people don't, that's not something that they necessarily want to make a financial sacrifice for. But you can really actually do a lot for the industry if you see it as a valuable service. This is just, I did this video partially because this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I've worked in this field for almost 20 years. I've worked very hard to be good at what I do. And a lot of people are very appreciative and are very supportive of my work. I get amazing clients. My clients love me for the most part. I've been fired a couple of times. I regret nothing. They were out of line. I had to tell them what's up. It was necessary. It's just, I got this one. Don't you know the customer's always right? That's not my policy here. It's a client relationship, not a customer. So those are just some of the thoughts on the mental health world in general. If you're thinking about going into, like, I had someone ask me recently, she's one of my office staff. She keeps thinking about becoming a therapist and going back to school. She has her bachelor's degree and she's thinking about going back to school to be a therapist. And she's like, do you think I should do it? And I'm like, nope. Don't. Nope. Don't do it. She's had a lot of issues in her life and she's still working through a lot of stuff. And becoming a therapist will not help. Will not help. It's a full-time job for me to keep both my feet on the ground, keep the stick on the ice. So if you're picking up what I'm putting down, you can really help us out You can help me out by, the tip jar link is below. If you appreciate my free content, you can really help me out by, yeah, you know what to do. Anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.